£1 million. That's the number currently sitting on the table for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. And the offer comes with a request that would send shockwaves through Buckingham Palace. Television producers are actively pursuing Meghan and Harry to participate in a documentary about Prince Andrew, the disgraced royal whose scandals continue to haunt the House of Windsor. According to sources close to the negotiations, the couple is certainly not entertaining the offer at this point. But those same sources add a telling detail that changes everything about this story, noting that as the offer rises, the calculation could shift entirely. Let's be clear about what we're witnessing here. This is not speculation about what the Sussexes might theoretically do someday. This is a real offer, from real television executives, with real money attached. The question facing Meghan and Harry right now, perhaps at this very moment, is whether family loyalty has a price tag, and if so, what number makes them willing to collect?
Of course, Harry and Meghan are certainly not entertaining the offer. That's what I've been told. But as the offer rises, and this is very easy the way that television works, selling that around the world could easily pull that money back in.
The timing of this offer tells us everything about how the entertainment industry operates. Prince Andrew's story is currently generating intense public interest, with multiple productions in development and a documentary about a former assistant to Sarah Ferguson scheduled to air within weeks. Television executives understand that royal content is streaming gold, and they are hunting aggressively for authentic insider voices rather than what industry sources dismissively call crackpots who've met him once or twice. When a genuine prince with childhood memories of Andrew and a wife who experienced the family's dysfunction firsthand become available, the checkbooks open wide. What the public sees is a simple yes or no decision. What actually exists behind closed doors is far more complicated, involving calculations about diminishing income, mounting expenses, and the uncomfortable reality that the Sussex brand has not delivered the fortune everyone expected. The couple who left royal life promising to become financially independent now faces a choice that could define their legacy forever, and the pressure to say yes grows stronger with every passing month of disappointing returns on their existing ventures.
The bottom line is, of course, TV bosses, for certain things, certainly have big checkbooks. And the also bottom line is, if you think about it, if they feel they're never going to return back, or indeed like Meghan Markle has no desire to return back to the royal fold, what would they have to lose?
The palace has dealt with embarrassing family members before, but this situation presents a nightmare scenario that keeps royal advisors awake at night. Multiple members of the family now exist outside the traditional structures of control, and each one represents a potential source of damaging revelations. King Charles believed he had neutralized the Andrew problem by stripping him of duties in public roles. That belief is proving dangerously optimistic. The documentary offer to Harry and Meghan demonstrates that the market for royal secrets remains strong, and producers will continue knocking on doors until someone answers. Prince Andrew represents more than just one problematic relative. His continued presence in the headlines reminds the public of everything the monarchy would prefer to forget, and every new documentary or interview revives conversations the palace has spent years trying to quiet. The idea that Harry might sit down and share his personal observations about his uncle, combining childhood memories with adult perspective on how the family handled scandal, represents exactly the kind of content that television executives dream about: authentic, emotional, and impossible to replicate through any other source.
They are putting together 2 or 3 right now, a major documentary on the disgraced former royal, otherwise known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the former Duke of York, and this is where it gets very indelicate.
The question is not whether Meghan and Harry need money. The question is how badly they need it, and what that desperation might lead them to accept. The answer lies in understanding just why this documentary opportunity has emerged at this particular moment, and why Andrew's story has become such valuable television property. Prince Andrew's fall from grace has been documented extensively, but the appetite for new angles and fresh revelations shows no signs of diminishing. The upcoming documentary focusing on a former assistant to Sarah Ferguson has generated major advance interest, proving that even peripheral figures in the Andrew story can command attention. For producers, this creates a clear hierarchy of value. If a former household staff member can attract viewers, imagine what an actual prince could deliver. The Crown demonstrated the commercial potential of royal content more convincingly than any market research ever could. Netflix's dramatized version of Windsor family history became the streaming platform's most successful drama, attracting billions of viewing hours and sparking countless debates about where entertainment ends and exploitation begins. That success changed how television executives view royal stories. What was once considered niche British content has revealed itself as globally appealing drama, with audiences from Tokyo to Toronto equally fascinated by palace intrigue.
You see, the problem that you've got, the longer that they feel ostracized and the longer that they feel we're offering to come back, that this offer, and again, I have to say predominantly this is just an offer right now, but this is what people think they would be worth.
Andrew's story offers something the Crown could only approximate through actors and scripts, which is the genuine perspective of family members who witnessed events firsthand. Harry grew up around his uncle, attending family gatherings, observing dynamics, and forming impressions that no biographer or journalist could access. Meghan experienced the institution during a period of intense scrutiny, watching how the palace responded to various crises and developing her own conclusions about who received protection and who was left exposed. Together, they represent exactly what documentary producers crave: authenticity that cannot be manufactured. The market for this content extends far beyond British audiences. International broadcasters and streaming services have demonstrated consistent willingness to pay premium prices for exclusive royal access. A documentary featuring Harry and Meghan discussing Andrew would attract interest from networks across Europe, major investment from American platforms hungry for aristocratic drama, and curiosity from Asian markets where British royalty maintains surprising cultural cachet.
Meghan flew all the way around the world on Harry's dime to appear on that fashion show because she thought that was going to be the opening thing, meeting the Anna Wintours, meeting the editor of Vogue. It was all going to fall into place. It hasn't, right? You have to work hard at this. Some things, though, come easy, like £1 million.
The £1 million initial offer reflects British valuation alone, but worldwide distribution rights could multiply that figure several times over. Television economics reward exclusivity, and nothing would be more exclusive than the Sussex perspective on Andrew. Journalists have written millions of words about the disgraced royal, but those words come from outside the palace gates. Commentators have offered endless analysis, but that analysis relies on speculation and anonymous sources. What Harry could provide is irreplaceable: the view from inside the family, delivered by someone who no longer feels obligated to protect institutional interests. Sarah Ferguson occupies a unique position in this scene, described by sources as being at the epicenter of the Andrew story, with potential value matching or exceeding what the Sussexes could command. Ferguson knows secrets that span decades, from her years as Andrew's wife through their unusual post-divorce cohabitation arrangement. The fact that television executives are simultaneously pursuing multiple family members creates a competitive active that could drive prices higher. If the Sussexes decline but Ferguson accepts, they lose use. If Ferguson holds out but the Sussexes agree, she becomes less valuable. This is not merely television production. This is psychological warfare conducted through contract negotiations. The producers assembling these documentaries understand that they need credible voices to raise their projects above tabloid speculation. Anyone can interview a former security guard or a distant acquaintance. The premium content comes from family members willing to break the unwritten code of royal silence. That willingness has a price, and television executives have made clear they are prepared to pay it. The financial reality facing the Duke and Duchess of Sussex bears little resemblance to the billion-dollar future that seemed possible when they first announced their departure from royal duties. The pandemic disrupted their launch, certainly, but Meghan's tendency to blame timing obscures a more uncomfortable truth. Public interest in the Sussex brand has simply not matched the couple's expectations or their spending habits. Harry's speaking engagements, once commanding fees that reflected his royal status and curiosity value, have declined noticeably in both frequency and compensation. Industry sources confirm that he is not as expensive as he was, a polite way of saying that event organizers have recalculated what a Sussex appearance is actually worth. The initial fascination with hearing from a prince who walked away has faded, replaced by a sense that the couple's talking points have become repetitive and their revelations increasingly stale. The lifestyle they have constructed assumes income that never fully materialized. Their Montecito estate, their security requirements, their staff, their travel, their children's eventual educational needs, all of these expenses were calibrated for a level of wealth that remained perpetually out of reach. When you build your life expecting tens of millions annually, and the reality falls short, the gap between expectations and income creates constant pressure to find new revenue sources. Meghan's entrepreneurial ventures have attracted considerable skepticism from industry professionals who question whether products like jam and candles can possibly generate the returns necessary to sustain their lifestyle. One observer bluntly assessed that anybody sitting down with any worth would have thought this is not going to work, suggesting that the people surrounding the Duchess have been more interested in collecting fees than offering honest strategic advice. The result has been a series of high-profile launches that generate publicity but fail to translate into sustainable business success. The couple's attempts to cultivate fashion and media connections have produced similarly disappointing results. Meghan's international travel to appear at fashion events, her meetings with Anna Wintour, her cultivation of Vogue relationships, none of these efforts have converted into the sustained opportunities she clearly seeks. Each appearance generates momentary attention without creating lasting momentum. The pattern suggests someone reaching for opportunities rather than having them flow naturally toward her. What does desperation look like for two people who cannot admit they are desperate? It looks like flying around the world for fashion show appearances that lead nowhere. It looks like advertising Disney products on social media. It looks like launching lifestyle brands in saturated markets. And eventually it might look like accepting £1 million to discuss family secrets on camera. The documentary offer exists because television producers recognize vulnerability when they see it. When sources describe what happens when you're on the decline, they are articulating a truth that applies directly to the Sussex situation. Opportunities come faster and more frequently when buyers sense that sellers have limited options. The £1 million offer is not merely a reflection of what Harry and Meghan know about Andrew. It is a calculation about how much financial pressure might make them willing to share it. Anyone predicting that the Sussexes would have disappeared from public consciousness by now has been proven consistently wrong. The couple has demonstrated striking resilience in the face of controversies that seemed certain to destroy their credibility. Meghan's admission during court proceedings that she had assisted with finding freedom, after previously indicating otherwise, should have been a career-ending moment of exposed dishonesty. The treatment of Thomas Markle, documented through his own public statements, created a narrative of familial cruelty that would typically generate lasting public disgust. Neither event produced the permanent damage that observers expected. This pattern of survival matters when predicting how the documentary situation might unfold. The Sussexes have learned that they can weather storms that would sink other public figures. Each supposed final straw has proven to be nothing of the sort, teaching them that the consequences of controversial choices are often less severe than warnings suggest. When palace sources caution that participating in an Andrew documentary would definitely be the final straw, Harry and Meghan have reason to doubt whether any straw truly is final. The comparison to politicians who survive scandal through persistence feels uncomfortably apt. Some public figures discover that simply refusing to accept defeat eventually exhausts their critics. The news cycle moves on, new outrages demand attention, and yesterday's unforgivable transgression becomes today's half-remembered controversy. The Sussexes have benefited from this active repeatedly, emerging from each crisis diminished but still standing. Their approach to Thomas Markle illustrates this resilience particularly clearly. Meghan's father has been treated in ways that would typically generate overwhelming public sympathy for the abandoned parent. Harry has never met his father-in-law, forming opinions based entirely on Meghan's characterizations rather than personal experience. The humanitarian couple who speak constantly about compassion and family values have shown neither to a sick elderly man who clearly wishes for reconciliation. Yet this obvious hypocrisy has not destroyed their brand or silenced their advocates. What does this survival instinct suggest about the documentary decision? It suggests that Harry and Meghan may calculate that participating would generate intense short-term criticism followed by eventual normalization. They have weathered worse. They have been declared finished before. The palace can threaten that an Andrew documentary would end any possibility of reconciliation, but the Sussexes might reasonably conclude that reconciliation was never genuinely available anyway. The resilience factor also influences how television executives approach negotiations. Producers understand that the Sussexes have proven willing to absorb criticism in exchange for financial reward. The Oprah interview generated massive negative coverage alongside its massive viewership numbers, yet the couple proceeded with additional projects that continued mining family grievances for content. This established pattern reassures documentary makers that Harry and Meghan possess the psychological fortitude to participate in controversial productions without backing out when pressure mounts. Whether this resilience reflects admirable determination or troubling shamelessness depends entirely on perspective. What cannot be disputed is that predictions of Sussex collapse have repeatedly proven premature. Betting against their willingness to accept lucrative but damaging opportunities has been a losing strategy, and television executives are gambling that this pattern will continue. The documentary offer reflects a calculation about what Harry and Meghan could actually contribute beyond their famous names. Harry possesses genuine insider knowledge that would be impossible to fabricate or approximate. He spent his childhood and young adulthood in proximity to Andrew, observing family dynamics at holidays, weddings, and the countless informal gatherings that constitute royal life. These observations exist nowhere else. No biographer can access them, no journalist can reconstruct them, and no other source can substitute for the prince who was actually present. Meghan brings a different but equally valuable perspective. She entered the royal family during a period when scandal management had become a constant institutional preoccupation. Her experience of how the palace protected certain members while exposing others to criticism forms a narrative that documentary producers would find irresistible. The contrast between how her alleged transgressions were handled versus how Andrew's far more serious allegations were managed has obvious dramatic potential. What would participation actually require? The Sussexes would need to share specific recollections, not merely general impressions. They would need to discuss private family conversations, describe behind closed doors reactions to Andrew's scandals, and characterize the attitudes of specific royals toward the disgraced prince. This level of detail transforms a documentary from celebrity gossip into genuine revelation, which is precisely why producers are willing to pay premium prices. The production process itself creates risks that extend beyond the initial filming. Sources with television experience emphasize that everything is done in the edit, warning that even participants who believe they are presenting themselves sympathetically can find their words recontextualized in damaging ways. Harry and Meghan would be surrendering control over how their contributions are framed, trusting producers whose primary obligation is creating compelling content rather than protecting Sussex interests. Sarah Ferguson's potential participation adds another dimension to these calculations. Ferguson has been described as occupying the epicenter of the Andrew story, possessing knowledge that spans their courtship, marriage, divorce, and bizarre continued cohabitation. If Ferguson agrees to participate while the Sussexes decline, producers would still have a valuable insider voice, but the documentary would lack the additional perspective that Harry could provide. The competitive active means that each potential participant's decision affects the value of the other's cooperation. The documentary format also allows for a kind of plausible deniability that direct statements do not. Harry could share observations and recollections while claiming he is merely contributing to historical understanding rather than attacking his uncle. The framing would be provided by producers, the conclusions drawn by audiences, and the Sussex role limited to offering raw material. This structure provides psychological cover for participation while still delivering the damaging content that makes such documentaries valuable. What remains unclear is whether Harry and Meghan fully appreciate how their contributions would be used. Their previous experiences with documentary production, including their Netflix series, occurred within projects they controlled. Participating in someone else's production about Andrew would mean accepting a fundamentally different power active. The Diana documentary that Harry reportedly continues pursuing through Netflix represents an ongoing complication that affects how the Andrew offer must be evaluated. Prince William's position has been unambiguous. Diana was his mother too. His memories matter equally, and any documentary that excludes his participation lacks legitimacy and balance. This fraternal conflict reveals Harry's willingness to monetize family history, even when doing so creates direct conflict with his brother. William's objection carries moral weight that is difficult to dismiss. Diana belonged to both sons equally, and any full documentary about her life and legacy should logically include both perspectives. Harry's apparent determination to proceed without William's cooperation suggests either a belief that his own memories are sufficient or an indifference to his brother's objections. Neither interpretation reflects well on the younger prince's judgment. Industry analysts question whether a Diana documentary without William's involvement would attract the interest Netflix presumably seeks. Audiences have become sophisticated about recognizing one-sided narratives, and a production featuring only Harry would inevitably be criticized as incomplete at best and deliberately distorted at worst. The absence of William's perspective would hang over the entire project, inviting skepticism about claims that cannot be corroborated by the one other person who shared Harry's childhood experience of their mother. The Diana situation creates precedent that makes the Andrew documentary offer more troubling. Harry has already demonstrated willingness to use family stories for content, regardless of other family members' wishes. The Diana Project tells producers that the prince views his memories as personal property, to deploy as he sees fit, unencumbered by obligations to coordinate with siblings or respect institutional preferences. This established pattern makes Harry a more attractive documentary participant, precisely because he has proven resistant to family pressure. The tension between the brothers over Diana also reveals the limits of palace use over Harry's decisions. William cannot prevent Harry from making a Diana documentary. He can only refuse to participate and publicly express disapproval. The same active would apply to an Andrew documentary. King Charles and William can warn that participation would constitute a final straw, but their ability to actually prevent Harry from accepting the offer is basically non-existent. The threats are moral rather than practical, and Harry has shown limited responsiveness to moral appeals from family members he considers hostile. Netflix's calculations regarding the Diana Project remain somewhat opaque. The streaming giant presumably wants content that will attract viewers without creating the impression that Netflix is enabling family destruction for profit. A Diana documentary that William publicly condemns would generate controversy that might attract initial viewership while creating longer-term brand concerns. The company must weigh immediate content value against reputational considerations that extend beyond any single production. What the Diana situation demonstrates most clearly is that Harry has already crossed lines that make the Andrew offer less dramatic than it might initially appear. A prince willing to make a documentary about his mother over his brother's objections has already accepted that family opposition will not determine his content decisions. The question is not whether Harry will participate in projects that damage family relationships. That question was answered long ago. The question is only which specific projects he will choose, and what compensation he will require. The warning from sources that participating in an Andrew documentary would definitely be the final straw deserves careful examination. Palace insiders have issued similar warnings before, and the predicted catastrophic consequences have consistently failed to materialize. The Oprah interview was supposed to be unforgivable. The Netflix series was supposed to end any possibility of reconciliation. The memoir Spare was supposed to constitute a permanent breach. Yet here we are, with family members still communicating occasionally, and the door to reconciliation never quite slamming completely shut. King Charles believed he had solved the Andrew problem through a combination of title stripping, duty removal, and financial pressure. The disgraced prince would fade from public consciousness, his scandals gradually receding into historical footnotes as more current events dominated attention. This strategy has proven dramatically inadequate. Andrew remains in the headlines, documentary producers continue developing projects about him, and his presence continues embarrassing the institution his brother now leads. The palace nightmare scenario involves multiple family members roaming around in the wild looking for money, as one source colorfully described the situation. Charles cannot control his brother, he cannot control his son, he cannot control his daughter-in-law. Each of these individuals possesses information damaging to the institution, and each faces financial pressures or grievances that might motivate disclosure. The monarchy's traditional tool of ensuring cooperation through financial dependence has been neutralized by independent income sources and inheritance payouts. The editorial control problem compounds these concerns. Even family members participating with genuinely sympathetic intentions can find their contributions reshaped through editing into something far more damaging. A documentary producer can take hours of interview footage and select the 30 seconds that create the most dramatic narrative, regardless of whether that selection fairly represents the participant's overall perspective. Harry and Meghan might believe they are offering balanced observations about Andrew, while editors construct a hit piece that uses their words as ammunition. The final straw framing assumes that the Sussexes value reconciliation enough to modify their behavior to preserve that possibility. This assumption may no longer be valid. Meghan has reportedly expressed no desire to return to the royal fold, and if that position is genuine, the threat of permanent estrangement loses its deterrent power. You cannot threaten someone with consequences they have already accepted or even welcomed. What would a genuine final straw actually look like? The palace has limited tools available. They could strip remaining titles, but that action might generate public sympathy for the Sussexes as victims of family pettiness. They could cut off remaining communication, but channels are already minimal. They could issue public condemnation, but that approach risks making the monarchy appear vindictive and obsessed with a couple they claim to have moved past. The fundamental problem is that the Sussexes have already absorbed most of the consequences the palace can impose. Further escalation offers diminishing returns while potentially creating martyrdom narratives that benefit Harry and Meghan's public positioning. Understanding why the documentary offer has reached £1 million requires understanding how television economics function in the streaming era. A production company does not simply write a check for that amount, hoping to recoup through a single broadcast. Instead, they sell distribution rights across multiple territories, with each sale contributing to overall revenue that can vastly exceed initial production costs. British broadcasting rights alone might justify a major portion of the payment to the Sussexes. American streaming platforms and networks, hungry for content with built-in audience awareness, would bid competitively for exclusive access. European broadcasters would want versions for their markets. Australian, Canadian, and other Commonwealth nations would purchase rights given their historical connections to the British monarchy. Asian markets, particularly those with strong interest in Western celebrity culture, would add additional revenue streams. The mathematics transform a £1 million payment into a reasonable investment with strong profit potential. The offer will likely increase because that is how these negotiations typically proceed. Initial offers establish baseline interest while leaving room for escalation as production timelines create urgency. Television executives who truly want Sussex participation will not accept no for an answer, if that refusal seems financially motivated rather than principled. Each rejection invites a higher offer until either the price becomes prohibitive or the potential participants demonstrate genuine unwillingness regardless of compensation. The global distribution model means that content embarrassing to the British monarchy plays to audiences with no particular loyalty to Windsor interests. American viewers have no investment in protecting King Charles. European audiences may actively enjoy seeing British institutions humiliated. International distribution transforms what might be a domestic scandal into worldwide entertainment, multiplying both the revenue potential and the reputational damage. Television executives pursuing royal content understand that authenticity commands premium pricing. Actors portraying royals in dramas like The Crown create entertaining content, but audiences recognize the distinction between performance and reality. A documentary featuring an actual prince discussing his actual uncle offers something no drama can replicate: the knowledge that these words come from someone who was genuinely present for events being described. That authenticity premium explains why producers are willing to pay amounts that might seem excessive for other documentary subjects. The big checkbooks that sources describe exist because returns on successful royal content have proven enormous. The Crown generated billions in viewership value for Netflix, establishing that audiences have nearly unlimited appetite for Windsor family stories told compellingly. Documentary formats offer lower production costs than scripted drama while potentially delivering comparable audience engagement. The economics favor aggressive pursuit of authentic royal voices willing to speak on camera. What happens if the Sussexes decline but the offer remains open? Television executives may simply wait, understanding that financial pressures tend to intensify over time. An offer rejected today might look more attractive in 6 months if other ventures continue disappointing. The £1 million sitting on the table creates ongoing psychological pressure, even if Harry and Meghan genuinely intend to refuse. Knowing that money is available, knowing their financial situation continues deteriorating, creates an active where acceptance becomes more likely with each passing quarter of underwhelming returns. The fundamental question facing the Duke and Duchess of Sussex is not whether to accept this specific offer at this specific price. The question is what they would lose by accepting, and whether they still value what would be lost. If Meghan truly has no desire to return back to the royal fold, then the documentary offer costs her nothing she actually wants. The threat of permanent estrangement only deters those who hope for eventual reconciliation. Someone who has abandoned that hope faces a very different calculation, one where short-term financial gain faces no meaningful long-term cost. Harry's psychology presents more complexity. His public statements suggest continued ambivalence about his family relationships, oscillating between expressions of love for his father and brother, and bitter recriminations about their failure to protect him and support his wife. This ambivalence might make him more susceptible to the argument that participating in an Andrew documentary does not necessarily doom other relationships. Uncle Andrew is not his father or brother. The documentary would focus on a relative whose disgrace is already public knowledge. Perhaps Harry could rationalize participation as limited commentary that does not implicate the family members he still hopes to reconcile with. The longer the Sussexes feel ostracized, the more attractive these offers become. Each perceived rejection from the palace reduces the psychological barrier to accepting money that further damages family relationships. If Charles and William continue maintaining distance, they inadvertently increase the likelihood that Harry will eventually accept offers like this one. The strategy of freezing out the Sussexes may feel satisfying, but creates conditions that make cooperation with documentary producers more rather than less likely. At what price does family loyalty become unaffordable? The Sussexes built their post-royal life assuming wealth that never materialized. Their choices now reflect that mismatch between expectations and reality. £1 million represents major money, but perhaps not enough to trigger acceptance given the controversy it would generate. $2 million might change the calculation. $5 million almost certainly would. The question television executives are really asking is not whether the Sussexes will participate, but what number makes them willing. The palace faces its own version of this question. What price would convince them to bring Harry and Meghan back into the fold with genuine support rather than grudging tolerance? What financial or logistical assistance might neutralize the economic pressures pushing the Sussexes toward controversial content deals? The monarchy possesses resources that could theoretically resolve the Sussex financial situation, but deploying those resources would reward behavior the institution considers unforgivable. These are perilous times, though reasonable people might disagree about who faces the greater peril. The monarchy confronts the possibility of ongoing embarrassment from family members outside its control. The Sussexes confront the reality that their brand has not delivered promised returns, while their lifestyle requires continued revenue. And television audiences confront the prospect of watching a family destroy itself in real time, transformed into content for global consumption. The £1 million offer remains on the table. The pressures pushing toward acceptance continue intensifying. The warnings from palace sources grow increasingly dire. And somewhere in Montecito, two people are calculating whether the number they have been offered is enough, or whether they should wait for the figure to climb higher before making a decision that cannot be reversed. What do you think about all this? Let me know in the comments and make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss the next one.